The movie kicks off with a glimpse of Sicily, a remote part of Italy. Out of the blue, in this far-off place, there was a secret drug-making place pretending to be a winery. Soon after, the boss of the place, named Fabrizio, showed up, and by chance, he had his grandson Romano with him. But when Fabrizio got there, he was stunned to see that the gate guards and his crew were all dead. Feeling that something wasn't right, Fabrizio told Romano to stay put in the car and not move. He went over to one of his guys who was still breathing. The guy mentioned that the one behind this massacre had been caught. Shockingly, the guy responsible for the massacre was Robert. In a laid-back manner, Robert told Fabrizio that he needed to shut down the drug operation, or he'd do it by force. But instead of complying, Fabrizio made a grave decision by saying his factory would keep running forever. Fabrizio also wondered how Robert, who had been captured, could put up such a fight. He then ordered one of his men to take out Robert right away. But with his lightning-quick skills, Robert managed to take down all of Fabrizio's men, leaving only himself standing. Before taking Fabrizio's life, Robert put him through a terrible ordeal. He started by shooting him in the buttocks, and then he shot him in the head. Afterward, Robert emerged from the scene and was taken aback when he saw Romano there. Robert immediately felt sorry for the young guy and had no plans to harm him. He told Romano to stay inside the car because he was about to leave that spot. Surprisingly, Romano shot Robert from behind using a shotgun that was in his car. After that, Romano made a quick escape. Unfortunately, the shot hit Robert in the back, causing him to collapse while holding the gun to his own head. It seemed like Robert wanted to end his own life because he was frustrated by the gunshot wound. He realized he would eventually bleed to death. However, he also understood that his actions were foolish because if he died, there would be no one to protect the people and fight against the mafia. Even though he was severely injured, Robert decided to return to his apartment in the Boston area of Italy. To reach that place, he needed to take a ferry first. A few hours later, Robert's condition took a turn for the worse. As he was driving away from the port, he eventually collapsed due to severe bleeding. Fortunately, a local police officer named Bonucci was patrolling the area. Thankfully, Robert was still alive but in critical condition. Without any delay, Officer Bonucci rushed Robert to his home in the Altamonte area of Italy. By chance, there was a doctor named Enzo at that place. Enzo was more than willing to assist Robert and immediately performed emergency surgery to remove the bullet that was still lodged in Robert's back. As time passed, Robert's condition improved and Enzo allowed him to stay at his home for as long as he needed. As it turned out, Enzo lived there alone. One day, Robert was feeling a bit restless, so he decided to step out of Enzo's house for some fresh air. He blended in with the surroundings and eventually made his way to a cafe to unwind. Robert found the neighborhood intriguing because, in his view, it had friendly locals and a peaceful atmosphere, free from traffic jams. It seemed like a perfect place to spend his retirement years. The next day, Robert returned to the cafe. However, he noticed the cafe owner giving money to a young man, which struck him as odd. Curious, he asked a waitress named Marina about what the young man was doing. Marina explained that every week, a group of gangsters known as Gamora collected money from local businesses. She went on to say that if these gangsters didn't get their money, they wouldn't hesitate to vandalize or even threaten to burn down people's establishments. After Robert left the cafe, the gang from Gamora headed to a fish store. Robert knew about it but had to stay quiet since he wasn't fully recovered yet. Later, the gang bumped into a man named Vincent, who was also demanding money from a local business owner. However, when the businessman refused, it infuriated Vincent. In a cruel twist, Vincent ordered his men to push the businessman's frail father in a wheelchair from the top of a building, leading to the elderly man's immediate death. Vincent is the leader of the Gamora gang, and he has a younger brother named Marco. These two siblings work closely together to extort money from businesses in the area. The following day, Robert also visited the fish store where Marco had been the day before. Robert wanted to buy 3 kilos of fish for his dinner with Enzo, but when he tried to pay, the fish seller wouldn't accept the money. The fish seller explained that it's their tradition to start with free prices for new customers. Meanwhile, in the beginning of the movie, CIA agents were investigating Fabrizio's drug factory, and they all felt confused about who the perpetrator of the massacre was. If it were a robbery or business rivalry, they expected money and drugs to be missing. Strangely, everything was still there. Late at night, when all the shops and stalls were closed, the local residents were suddenly alarmed by a fire at the fish seller's shop. Robert, who witnessed the incident, felt powerless. However, he suspected that the culprits might be from Gamora's gang, since they were nearby and had been around when the fire started. The following day, Benucci gathered all the CCTV footage from around the area of the fire. After reviewing the footage, he confirmed that Gamora's gang had intentionally started the fire. Benucci promptly reported this wicked act to his superiors. The next day, while Robert was at his usual cafe, he was approached by a CIA agent named Emma. Robert had previously informed the CIA about the troublesome Gamora gang member in the Altamonte area. Robert decided to involve the CIA because he discovered that Gamora had a connection with Fabrizio, the drug dealer in Sicily. Gamora's gang seemed to be getting their drugs from Fabrizio, so the money they collected from residents through extortion was being used to buy drugs from him. Now let's go back to Benucci, who was waiting for his daughter to return from school. During that time, Benucci received a call from Marco, who informed him that his daughter had safely arrived home. This news made Benucci anxious, and he rushed back to his house. It turned out that Gamora's gang had taken his daughter and wife hostage because he had intervened in the fire incident the day before. Benucci had been severely beaten by Marco, who warned him that if he ever got in the way of their gang again, his daughter and wife would suffer. Injured, Benucci sought treatment at Dr. Enzo's house. Robert, who witnessed this, grew even more frustrated with Gamora's gang and their harm to innocent people. Later that evening, while Benucci and his family were dining at a restaurant, Gamora's gang paid him another visit. They wanted Benucci to arrange a patrol boat for delivering drugs to their customers. Robert, who happened to be there, overheard their conversation. However, Marco sensed Robert watching them and approached him. Marco reminded Robert that if he didn't want to end up beaten like Benucci, he should stay out of their business. But Robert wasn't the least bit scared because he knew he was much tougher than the arrogant Marco. In a swift move, Robert effortlessly immobilized Marco, rendering him completely helpless. Robert then instructed Marco to have all his gang members vacate the restaurant. Afterward, he demanded Marco to surrender his gun and promptly left the scene. Marco, feeling humiliated by an older man, ordered his men to confront Robert. However, things took an unexpected turn as Robert took on all of them. He eliminated 2 of Marco's men and brutally ended the life of another with a bottle. Following that, Robert ruthlessly shattered Marco's hand. Marco attempted to retaliate by drawing a knife, but Robert quickly disarmed him. Ultimately, Robert succeeded in defeating Marco, ending his life. A few days later, after Marco's burial, a corrupt police inspector named Simeon paid a visit to Vincent's house. Vincent immediately asked Inspector Simeon to identify Marco's killer. With regret, Inspector Simeon stated that he couldn't assist because the case had been closed, citing it as a gang rivalry motive. Unhappy with this response, one of Vincent's children apprehended Inspector Simeon. Following that, Vincent ruthlessly severed Inspector Simeon's wrist. Meanwhile, CIA agents continued their investigation into Fabrizio and Gamora's drug network. They even discovered large quantities of these drugs in other areas. As Emma was about to return to the office, multiple CIA cars suddenly exploded, resulting in the death of several CIA officers. Emma herself was thrown by the explosion, but luckily survived with serious injuries. That night, Gamora's gang took Benucci hostage. They brought him to the city center when most residents were at rest. Vincent screamed repeatedly, prompting residents to come out of their homes. Vincent demanded that they reveal who had killed Marco. If no one confessed, he threatened to kill Benucci. However, the residents remained silent and instead began recording the scene on their cell phones. Amid the chaos, Robert arrived with guns in hand and admitted that he was the one who killed Marco. He made it clear that if Vincent wanted to arrest him, he should let Benucci go. When Vincent learned that Robert was the one who killed Marco, he initially wanted to take revenge and kill him. However, Vincent abandoned his plans because residents were recording the scene. Ultimately, Vincent and his gang decided to leave the area and release Benucci. The following night, Robert managed to infiltrate the Gamora gang headquarters. He quietly and skillfully defeated the gang members one by one. Meanwhile, Vincent was fast asleep in his room. Unbeknownst to him, drops of blood from the injured gang members on the glass roof above him kept falling on his face until he woke up. Realizing that all his men were defeated and he had no options left, Vincent became panicked and confused. Shortly after, Robert appeared and knocked him unconscious. When Vincent regained consciousness, he found himself tied up. Calmly, Robert remarked that this situation was fitting for Vincent because he had inflicted torment on others as he pleased. Robert made it clear that he intended to do the same to Vincent. In fact, before Vincent regained consciousness, Robert had cruelly placed dozens of drug pills inside Vincent's body. Robert stated that within 6 minutes, Vincent would inevitably succumb to the torture of a drug overdose. After saying this, Robert untied Vincent and told him to go as far as he could. Vincent stumbled out of his hideout, but unfortunately, he was struck by a car. Despite the accident, Vincent managed to survive and keep moving. However, when the 6-minute mark passed, Vincent finally succumbed to the overdose and passed away. The next day at the hospital, Emma was seen watching the news about the remaining members of the Gamora gang getting arrested. The news brought her a sense of relief. Before long, Robert paid her a visit, carrying a bag filled with millions of dollars in cash. He explained that he had retrieved the money from the Gamora gang's headquarters to replace the pension funds of an elderly couple that had been taken by the gang some time ago. Once Emma had recovered, she fulfilled Robert's request to deliver the money to the elderly couple he had mentioned. Neither of them had expected their money to be returned, and that's how the Equalizer 3 came to an end. The moral lesson from this story is that justice and fairness should prevail even in the face of great challenges. It underscores the significance of standing up against evil and corruption, even when it seems overwhelming, and shows how individuals can make a positive impact in the fight against injustice.